Thank you. How you doing?
Good. How are you, Rabbi?
Baruch Hashem. Doing good. Doing good.
Quick question.
Sure.
Are the rules for the 3 weeks the same for Ashkenazi and Sephardi, or is it different?
Different. Yeah, radically different.
Okay. Can you give me like one radical difference?
Yeah, Ashkenazim can't get married during the 3 weeks, and Sephardim can, up until Tisha B'Av, until Rosh Chodesh. That's one. The idea of music is not a problem until Rosh Chodesh. There's some big differences. Definitely.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the music because I read something online that maybe the Sephardim don't have that restriction until
we don't, right? Till Rosh Chodesh, right?
Yeah.
And some, according to some, it's just even the week in which Tisha B'Av occurs, which this year there really isn't one because it comes out on Sunday, so it's almost no restrictions in some respects. So, yeah.
Interesting.
Okay. Beit HaMikdash is going to be built anyway, so it's a moot point.
Yay! It's going to be a moot issue.
Yeah, the only thing holding it up is that you're not here to build it. No.
I know. Wow, I wish I was there.
I know. Okay, let me try. Bezrat Hashem. Okay.
I have been to a Sheva Brachot for Sephardim Erev Tisha B'Av.
Erev Tisha B'Av?
Yeah, I think it was Sheva was like this year, Sunday, and the Sheva Brachot was Friday morning.
That would be fine. Yeah, that would be fine.
Right, that was it. It was very strange though. As an Ashkenazi to be there amongst all these
Yeah.
It's before Tisha B'Av in the Sheva Brachot.
Okay, let me tell you the basic layout, what we're going to try and do tonight. We're in the middle right now of paragraph 10. I don't know what page that's on, so if you have the book, you can tell me. We're in the middle of page 10. It's a very long paragraph. In the middle, where it starts saying Ve'achar kein chazar al to'elet yiridat hadmatar, where it starts talking about rain falling on trees. Okay, so I don't know what page it is, but if you have the book, you can tell me.
Page 506.
506. Let me write that down. 506, page number. Maybe one of these days I'll buy the book. I have a different version of it. That's why I can't use the same page numbers.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I have it, but I have a different printing. So on page 506, we're going to get started in a moment. And what we're doing here right now for the next part of this paragraph is still taking apart this one chapter of Tehillim that we said is more of a chapter of praise of God for what we call, quote, nature, and how it relates to the psukim in Breshit of creation. After that, he's going to veer into another topic that kind of will dovetail into it, and that's what we're going to discuss, having to do with the differences of what's called the inanimate objects, animate objects, animals, plant life, humans, the differences, and we're going to also have to talk in general about Greek philosophy. So it's interesting stuff coming up, I hope. Okay. Let me do this. Okay. And down. Okay. So what I've done is I'm muting everybody. If you have something you want to share, obviously, please feel free to unmute yourselves. Okay, again, we're on page 506, the paragraph that starts with V'achar kein chazar al to'elet. This has to do, again, when he's in the middle, he's already talked about certain parts, certain aspects of creation in this particular chapter of Tehillim. And now he's going to continue. And then after that, David HaMelech goes to the topic of Yeridat HaMatar LaIlanim instead of Ilanot. I don't know why he writes it that way. He talks about the positive benefits of rain on trees. Kamosha Amar, as he says, God's trees are sated, the cedars of Lebanon. And also that there's a benefit. We don't think about this, but listen to this brilliance. There's a benefit to tall trees. Why? That's where the birds make their nests. to'elet minachayim. Just like their tall mountains are beneficial for certain animals, k'moshama harim hagvohim, the tall mountains, la ye'elim, silaim, machsela shifanim, that they are beneficial for certain animals. We know that there are certain animals that you don't see, you wouldn't see. Let's say if you've been to En Gedi, generally you're not going to see certain animals just walking around on the plain, on the flat area, but you're going to see them in the mountains. And that's because that's their nature to want to be in those type of an environment. Remember, he's the Rav is connecting everything here to the words in Breshit of creation. So when the Torah says he created the Yabasha, the dry land, it wasn't just that it's dry. It also has, meaning it's not just a lack of where the water is, but it also serves a function. The high trees for a purpose, the high mountains for a purpose. Imagine if you had no trees that were high. You wouldn't have shade. These certain birds would not be able to make their nests. Think about giraffes who need to, if everything was more of a shrub, that'd be very difficult for them to eat. The next topic that he deals with in this chapter of Tehillim is about the luminaries in the sky, the sun and the moon. When he says, he created the moon for holidays. Now, what does that mean? We know that the Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar and involves the solar calendar. What does that mean? It was a solar year, and we've talked about this already in Kuzari. The solar calendar does not have months, and a lunar calendar does not have years. A lunar calendar is the moon. A moon is a month, a full revolution. A full revolution of the Earth around the sun is a year. There is no gradation of months within a solar year. So, which is why we have January in English, January, February, March, April. Those are arbitrary. There are no. It's not tied to anything in particular. So Hashem created the moon for Mo'adim because we know that we base our calendar on what used to be the sighting of the new moon, and then based on that, we would know when Rosh Chodesh is, and we'd know when the Pesach and everything else would be. V'zachar to'elet halayla. Then it also mentions the benefit of night. Let me explain. I'm going to translate the words and I'll explain what he means. That the creation of darkness or of light was on purpose and not by chance. What does that mean? I'm in a room right now that has light because the lights are on. If I walk out of the room, would you describe it as I created darkness in the room, or I just put out the light? There's no light, right? There's no light. When I want to turn on the light, there's no darkness. But it's so what he's saying is that when Hashem created the Choshech, that was an actual creation. It wasn't just, there was no light. V'lo tohu b'ma'asehu, and there's nothing empty in his creation. V'lo b'mikrim hatulim b'ma'asehu. Ki halayla hu zman heder hashemesh. Even though night there's a lack of sun, but the darkness that he created, the choshech, the night, Laila, had a benefit. Why? As it says, Tashed choshech v'hi Laila. Umashelo samuchlo min ha'ma'amar b'zichron ha'chayot ha'mazikot la'adam b'alichatam b'Laila v'he'osvam bayom. I mentioned this briefly last time. There are many predatory animals that exist that are very dangerous, and they'd be dangerous to humans. Wolves, jackals, whatever else you fancy. Many of these animals are nocturnal. They're only going to be out at night. And so during the day, when most people are around and doing things, these animals are not going to generally, unless there's corona and all kinds of things change in nature, which we've seen, they will not be there to bother you. They only come out at night. Adam, chayot, harigilot imadam, and humans, and the animals with which humans are working or used to, behefechzek, is the exact opposite. Kasher amar, as it says, what would have happened if cows and sheep and deer and oxen were all nocturnal? Think about that. They're not nocturnal. They don't live or awake at night. They sleep during the day. They sleep at night, and they're alive, they're working during the day, so to speak. We wouldn't have animals to have plowed fields. We wouldn't have been able to deal with grazing the sheep, at least properly. Everything would have been topsy-turvy. So not only does Hashem create choshech, create darkness, but also he used that darkness to protect human beings by making sure that certain animals which needed to be brought into existence. Why? You have to ask Hashem. But then when the average normal people would be asleep or in their homes protected, those animals would be out. And when they would be awake and going about their daily business, those animals would be sleeping at night, during the day rather. And just the opposite for the animals that the humans need. We don't think, I don't. I've never thought in those terms whatsoever. But when you think about the chokhmah, the absolute brilliance in creation, we can't conceive of it, obviously. Continuing. He talks about all kinds of life here, both in terms of rivers, in terms of the lights of the sky. And then he mentions human beings. The only thing he doesn't really mention in this particular mizmor are the things that live in the water. Again, we're talking about 800 years ago, that the majority of the way that fish, what do you call amphibians, I guess, all their life under the water, were not very well known. And the chokhmah of how things happen underwater, how certain fish do certain things, and how we know nowadays that there are things that swim at depths that humans can't really go to, and that they don't even have eyes, they never see sunlight, and yet they're there. Why did Hashem create them? For a similar reason he created the stars that we will never be able to get to and can't even see in most cases. But he says that the chokhmah, the wisdom that which they exist and their creation and how they act is not as revealed to us as it is for everything else that we see that he's been talking about so far. And he gave a general overall description of Hashem's chokhmah and wisdom in that which is revealed by saying, Ma rabu ma'asecha Hashem. How great are how wondrous are your actions. This is a phrase, if you don't know by heart, you should learn. Marabu ma'asecha Hashem is something that one should say, not halachically. It's something that should be part of you. Just like when you see a rainbow, you go, whoa, is that beautiful, right? Like, yay, God, that was great. When you see a beautiful mountain, when you see vistas, you see a beautiful sunrise or sunset, you could say, Marabu ma'asech Hashem. You are taking into consideration the grandiosity of Hashem's, the magisterial actions that Hashem has ingrained into what we call the universe. Then he goes back to talk about the seas, and what is in them. Now he says this pasuk that appears in this particular chapter of Tehillim, kinui le'omro vayira Elokim et kol asher asa v'nei tov meod. That just like in Breshit, when there's a general statement that Hashem looked at all that he had done and it was very good, when it says in this Tehillim that Bihi chavod Hashem le'olam yismach Hashem b'ma'asav, that God should be, quote, rejoice in his actions, is the parallel pasuk. V'amar al yom hashvi'i, and it's regarding Shabbat, it says, 3 verbs. Vayishbot, I'm going to use the word rested, but it's not what it means. I'll come back to that. Vayivarech, and he blessed the day. Vayikadesh, and he infused it with holiness. Bavur shenishlemu ha'ma'asim ha'tivi'im asher yishlemu bazman. Because Hashem ceased creating, which is really the meaning of Vayishbot. It doesn't mean he rested. He ceased creating those things that are bound by time. Well, isn't everything bound by time except God? So hang on one second. And then discussed humans that actually can get to the level almost of angels, that don't need natural powers. Why? Because because humans are intellectual. I'm going to read what he says, then I'm going to explain. This will bring the end to this topic. Einam tzrichim lakochot haTivi'im. They don't need natural power or powers of nature. Mipnei shehem schalim, because since they are intellectual, einam tzrichim b'fa'olehem el zman. They don't need for them to act. They don't need time. I'm going to challenge you to ask you what you think he's talking about. Kasher anachnu roim hasechel yitzer berega echad hashamayim va'aretz. In the person's intellect, he could in fact design, draw, create heaven and earth. It's the world of this world and the world of rest. Okay, let me explain this last piece. You and I, in absolutely every single thing in creation, is finite. We know that. Everything that's in creation is bound by time. Time flows unidirectional. It only goes one direction. And yes, I am aware of the fact that time can be elongated, that time can be not manipulated, but changes depending on speed. We know from Einstein, this concept of relativity, the theory of relativity, that including all kinds of other things. And I'm not going to even talk about light, but just time right now. Are anyone here familiar with the twin paradox? Anyone hear of this? No? Let me tell you what the twin paradox is. Based on Einstein's theory of relativity.
Brothers, 2 astronauts from NASA.
Right, very good. So
Martin
what
Kelly
the twin paradox, thank you. The twin paradox is as follows. Based on Einstein's theory of relativity, if you took a pair of twins and you sent them into space, you sent one of them into space. One stays on Earth and one goes into space with an infinite amount of energy, which is what you would need to go faster than the speed of light, which doesn't exist, but we're talking theoretical, and would go out into space and travel and fly and fly and fly. The time slows down for that twin that's in space. And when he flies back in what appears to him to have been just a year and comes back to Earth, in Earth, 50 years, I'm just using a random number, 50 years will have elapsed. And his twin brother will be 50 years older than he is. It will look like he traveled into the future, but for him, he only traveled for 1 year because of the idea of the amount of speed and how time is, I'll use the word warped. It's not really what it is warped by speed. But having said that, we still know that you cannot travel back in time. I wish there would be such a thing as a time machine. I'm sure I know I've mentioned this many times over the last 10 years in all my classes. That's one of the things of fascination I have in life is time travel. I don't sit there and contemplate it, but it's something I do think about once in a while and teach about. In any case, so what's he talking about here? That we're not bound by time. We don't have any restrictions in certain things, but where don't we? Our intellect. What does that mean? I can sit and I can think about myself walking on Alpha Centauri, it's the name of a star. I can picture that, right? The fact that I can't get there, the fact that there's no human way to get there right now and survive, it makes no difference. In my mind's eye, in my brain, in my intellect, I can conceive of it. I can create a world. Think about people who are authors, who write fantasy novels, who write whatever it might be, and allow the mind and the imagination to wander. Our dimion, our imagination, is a very, very powerful tool, because without our imagination, we would be still living in the Stone Age. Think about that. I don't know about you, but there are times I walk around, whether it's in downtown Yerushalayim or in the United States, and you're passing by some of these massive buildings. It's like, how do they figure out how to do that? You get in an airplane. How did they figure out how to do that? You use your cell phone, glasses. Who thought the idea to take wheat, grind it, make flour, add water, yeast, make bread out of it? Okay, all these things, it required imagination. And because of imagination, when you say, let your mind wander, you're not bound by anything, not time. Your mind doesn't get to a certain point and go, oh, I ran out of space. Okay, I can't think beyond that. It's like numbers. Numbers are infinite. They're not bound by time, but that isn't what's really an abstract concept, anyways, called mufshat in Hebrew. There's no such thing as the highest number because you could always add one. And that's what he's talking about, that human beings, more than anything else in the universe, has a part of the human being that is not bound by time. And therefore, when we talk about the concept of a chelek Eloka mima'al, a piece of God from above, and that's a topic we're going to talk about many, many months from now, Bezrat Hashem, that's part of it, our imagination, where we can be creative in our mind. I cannot draw to save my life. I can draw a stick figure of a human, and that's pretty good. Okay, I can be creative in other ways, but I can't draw. And therefore, in my mind, I'm a better painter than Picasso. I can be a better painter. I can imagine this most beautiful, beautiful painting that I can draw, but only in my mind. So like that, I can be I'm gonna just go get a cup of water in a second, sorry.
Shit.
Okay, here we go. Let's see, where are we? Okay. Now, at this point, we're in the middle of this paragraph still. We started on page, what did I say? 506. I don't know what page we got up to, but there's this one line right now that says the following. V'ata, and now, nashuv el divarenu al da'at anshe ha'hakasha. He says, let us go back now to discuss the philosopher's views. You will recall, and by the way, in this essay, there are like, unlike the rest of the book, there's some places that have very, very long paragraphs. This essay has many, many paragraphs that go on for pages and pages and pages. So that's why you're going to get a little chopped up here. So he said, remember that we were talking about the difference in the philosopher's approach to how we find God versus the Jewish approach. The Jewish approach is top down. We have the Emunah in Hashem, and is therefore that works its way down, that we see Hashem in everything. From the philosophical point of view, we see things here, and through that we say, oh, there must be a creator, and there has to be something, and not to the same extent, but we're going to see tonight that it's not the same as a Jewish perspective. But now he says, okay, let's get back to the philosophical approach for a moment. I'm going to show you tonight. We're only going to look at it maybe 2 slides, but actually more than that. Let me just do a quick screen share here. Oh, I didn't open the PowerPoint, did I? No, let me open the PowerPoint. Come back to you. Boom. Screen share. Close this. Sorry. Second. Here we go. Okay. There's a paragraph that had like 2 words on one page before it. So I thought I wrote it on the top. I guess I cut it off. So it says, Kuzari hu sefer emunah. The Kuzari, the book we've been doing for about 5 years, I looked today, is a book of emunah. It's all about emunah, Murray. Did you realize there was a whole book written about, not that you wrote a couple books, which you already did beautifully, but there's also a book about you. There's many books I've written about you, Baruch Hashem. HaKuzari sefer emunah shemegi'a milamala lamata. It's the concept of emunah that it works from, it's like I said, top down. Upo, and now here, ne'ota chaver lahakdish iyun katzar b'shitat hafilosofim. He is now appropriately going to spend a little bit of time. He's going to lahakdish time. It's a great word to know. You know, we think of the word kadosh, of holiness, but when you set aside time for somebody, you say lahakdish zman, which doesn't just mean to set aside, but also means to sanctify that time. You set the time aside for somebody. He's going to set time aside now for a brief look into the approach of the philosophers. She'inyanam livnot, that their approach is to build, to build and to prove God's existence, koma achar koma, one level after another. Al pi hasechel enoshi, using intellect. This is very important. We have to remember this. This is when we talk about intellect, it means proof, science. Vetulo, and using nothing else. The word tu, taf vav, is Aramaic, means more. So is how the philosophers came to their well-known study of the abstract, based just on their human powers of intellect. But emunah hi inyan acher legamre. Faith in Hashem is a completely different thing. Hi havraka mimromim. It's a flash from above. Me'en nevuah, almost a form of prophecy. Ribono shel olam medaber elenu va'anu makshivim. God speaks to us and we listen. It's a very different approach than saying, okay, let's prove God's existence. I know they're amoeba, and they're from the amoeba, blah, blah, blah. And because of this, blah, 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 blah. Oh, there must be some greater creator out there. We've never built our faith in God and our relationship to that based on the help of philosophy. You're going to say, wait a minute, of course they're Jewish philosophers. Hang on. The reason we don't use philosophy only to prove the existence of Hashem is because there's a central point that would cause a problem, which is anything that is based only on intellect can be in doubt. Emunah, faith, is absolute. And a meeting with God with no intermediary. We see, literally, we see with our own eyes clearly the power of the presence of Hashem. Al kol panim, me'at mizeh b'siyumo shel hasefer, mutar v'afilu chiyuvi. However, towards the end of this book, now it's many, many more pages, but relatively speaking, it's towards the end of the book, it's okay and appropriate and positive even to talk a little bit about philosophy. And now he's going to start to give the perspective of the philosophers of the world, the world view of the philosophers about God and creation. Now, he's already started this. He took a little turn to tell us a Jewish perspective. He then talked to us about this particular chapter of Tehillim. And now he is, let me just turn the air conditioning off. And now he's talking to us about something else. Now, in order to make this not cumbersome, heavy, confusing, and convoluted, to use a few good words, we're going to do a cherry pick a few sentences from the next couple paragraphs. This next paragraph probably begins in your book with the words Ki hayesodot ka'asher yimazgu. But I want you to go down a bunch of lines and find the following words. I wish I had a copy of the book and I could tell you exactly where it was. Sorry. Look for the words in Hebrew, and someone can find and tell me what they are. V'haya kol asher lo hakochot ha'ele lagidul. Any of those items, things that have the power of growth, or holada, birth. See if you can tell me what page that is. It's probably somewhere around 510, but I don't know, 508. Anyone find it? You have to, if you find it, take yourself off mute so you can tell me. Again, the words v'haya kol asher lo hakochot.
I found it, but I can't help you because it's on.
I know you're using the Sefaria, right? Thanks.
So I don't have any page numbers.
Yeah, okay, no problem.
I don't even know if it's before or after the Va'ata that we were on earlier.
It's after.
It's after?
Yeah.
Long after?
It's
Shortly
about
after?
probably 10, 12 lines at least.
Right.
Okay,
These
so
paragraphs are very long sometimes.
Yes, I know, which is why I really need to get my hands on it. I'm just going to get myself a copy that's the same printing as yours, so I can tell you page numbers here. Okay. So I'm gonna start reading, and I'm gonna explain. He's gonna break down the philosophical differences. I'm not saying that right. He's gonna break down the approach of philosophers to the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and humans. Now, before we do that, you know that there are what we call in English, we've talked animal, vegetable, mineral. We're not talking about that type of distinction right now. We have inanimate objects, such as rocks, such as some of my students. No, sorry. Inanimate objects like rocks. We have things that are someach, that grow, like trees and plants and grass. We have chai, we have things that live like animals. And then we have midaber, which are the speakers, meaning humans. Remember, speech is that one key difference between humans and everything else in Hashem's creation. We've spoken about this before. So it's known as domem, someach, chai, midaber. Domem, inanimate, someach, that which grows, chai, that which lives, not the humans, but like animals, birds, etc. And then midaber, which is the speakers, human beings. So the first topic he's going to talk about are plants. And he's going to talk about the concept of how we identify, how we quantify each one of these, and how they are on different levels of nature, and that they have a closer, quote, relationship with God. Let's take a look. It says as follows: V'haya, kol asher lo hakochot ha'ele, any object that has these qualities, gidul, grow, holada, can give birth, kibul mahamazon, receive its food. I'm going to come back to that. I'm sorry, I should finish the sentence. Lo yanua tnuah mekomit, and doesn't move. They don't go from one place to another. Hu asher yanhigeu hateva. Those items are controlled by what we call teva, nature, al divrei philosophy, according to what the philosophers say. So first of all, what's he talking about? He's talking about the plant world, plants and trees and things. How come? They grow. What do you mean they give birth? Seeds, right? The transfer from the seeds gives birth to other trees and plants and other things. They receive their nourishment. What does it mean they receive their nourishment? Plants and trees, at least in my garden, don't get up and walk away to look for water and get up and walk away to look for food, right? The roots grow and seek out the water, but they're not moving. They're just moving from place to place. They're growing. They don't move, right? But if I put a tree in where a tree is, that's where the tree stays. If I put a flower, that's where the flower stays. I'm not talking about the fact that the wind can blow the petals away or something, which is also part of nature, how it blows away the seeds in certain cases. And what controls those things? Nature, with a capital N. The al ha'emet, says the Chaver, in truth, shaborei yitbarach yanhigem b'tchuna mehatchunot. He says that Hashem, what do you mean nature? There's the philosophers say nature. That's what makes the trees grow, and that's what makes them get their nourishment and everything else. It's in their nature that the seeds will fall into some other place and make other things grow. Krata tchuna, you call it what you want, in tachbots, whatever you want. Teva or nefesh or koach, you could call it nature, you could call it soul, you could call it power, but bottom line, it's Hashem. We can take a look at one slide. I didn't take you off of screen share. Okay. This slide has one more line on another page, and we're going to look at, I'll read you the last line, and we're going to look at a fascinating, very brief midrash that I'm sure many of you know it, and also don't think it was the actual midrash. Thought it was just somebody made this up. We'll get to it in a minute. Kach to'anim hamad'anim. So have the scientists claimed, shekol tzurot hadomim, that all forms of inanimate objects, hinam tirkovot shel yesodot b'lo kol tchunat chayim b'koach hamechayeh otan. That all things like a stone, for example, are made up of different elements that have no life force to them whatsoever, nor do they give life, nor do they need to have sustenance. But when it comes to plants, it's hard for the philosopher to look at a flower and say, there's no life in a flower. Okay, therefore, yomru, they don't have a new level, but rather a slight improvement over something that is inanimate inanimate, that they also have elements in them, but it has just a little bit of an improvement over the rock. The same thing is true when you go to the next level. It's just another improvement. L'shitatam, according to their approach, hatzemach ubalachayim domim vishonim mehadomem b'chach sheyesh lehem nefesh. According to the philosophers, the difference between plant life and animal life, which they're similar items, are different from that which is inanimate by the fact that they have some kind of life force. And the more the amalgam of the different elements is there, it can come to a higher level of godliness, meaning a stone versus a plant versus an animal, each level up is something more godlike, or godly rather. Al-kain, therefore, litzmachim yesh hakara u'tchusha mesuyemet me'en chochma instinctivit. I'm going to skip down to the last, to right here, where it says va'anu, right here. Va'anu, and we, haluyadana mizman she'ateva begematria, you've never noticed this maybe, the word teva in gematria is Elokim. That the word that we use for nature, teva, is the same numerical equivalent of Aleph, Lamed, He, Yud, Mem. That's 31, 41, 81, and 5, 86. Teva is 70, 79. I just did it wrong. It's 81.
You need
80.
hateva, not teva.
Right, Hateva. Correct. That's 86. Okay. Hateva and Elokim is the same gematria. Now, Al Kol Panim, nevertheless, in any case, HaPilosoph muda lachach sheyesh ezo chochma hapoelet betoch hateva. Even the philosopher says right here, the second to last line, that that nature still has some kind of a higher intellect working with it. Hatzemach haboded mitkale, an individual plant growth blend dies off. Achamin mosif litkayim lolam, but its zan, its genus, its species will continue forever. I'm just going to read without, because you're not going to have it on the screen. And if you want to still be obstinate and still call this nature, that's the same thing. Hashem is Teva. Again, he's repeating something we saw, I think it was in the third essay, that this whole idea of Teva, the difference between the philosophical approach and the philosopher approach and the Jewish approach is the philosophers say that Teva is something that runs by itself. Okay, so there's a God behind it somehow, but it runs by itself. We believe that that Hashem is nature. Chazal karu lachach malach. Chazal called this an angel. Ha'omer lechol tzemach gadel. It says to every growth, grow. Now, this is going to be, I'm going to put it on the screen here and show you this midrash that I have a feeling most of you have heard of before and thought it was made up by some modern day poet. It's not. It's in Breshit Rabbah. Barsir Amar, Eloka he'ela samim min haaretz. God brought forth, now this case doesn't mean drugs. It means poisons. Bahem harofei, not poisons, drugs, but not in a bad way. With them, the doctor is able to heal that which has been hurt, the wound. And with those drugs, I will say chemist / pharmacist, okay, I know I have multiple language audience here, will you grind them to make the drug that's necessary. Now comes the important part for our part. Amar Rabbi Simon. Rabbi Simon said, there is not a blade of grass in the world that doesn't have for it a mazal in the shamayim. Loosely translate mazal as fortune. It's not what it means. That hits it. The omerlo gidal, and says to it, grow. What does that mean? If you go to a park, I say that because most people in Israel don't have grass. You go to a park that has grass, not the synthetic stuff, but the real McCoy. This midrash in Breshit Rabbah tells us what's making that grass grow. So You say, well, got water and sunshine and nature. It's what it. Yes, it is. But nature, we said, is Hashem. And he says that Hashem has, according to the Bereshit Rabbah, every blade of grass, as it grows, does not grow until a malach says to it, grow, as messenger of Hashem. You'll sometimes see this not in poetry, but in, like, I've seen actually a brief excerpt of this on T-shirts, other places, people sometimes post it online, and this is the source for it, in Bereshit Rabbah. Okay, I'm gonna take you off the screenshot. Okay. Let's take a look now at the next part, the next paragraph we're coming up to. We're going to talk, we talked about the plant world. We're going to talk about the animal kingdom now. Take a look where it says, the chasher daka mezeg yoter. Take a look for that paragraph. It should be the next thing if you were following along. The chasher daka mezeg yoter. The more refined the elements are in an item, v'nizdamen leheraot, bo hachokma elokit yoter, and its chance to show the greater intellect of God in that item, should have then a higher level of more than just what every else things has in nature, to the point where it can go a distance to its source of food. Meaning, we said that a tree and a plant don't get up and walk away to go find their food. But the higher you are on the food chain, literally, in this case, we're talking now about the animal kingdom, the animal doesn't sit there and wait for the food to come to it. It seeks out its food. And all of its body parts are connected. And they only move when the body commands it to move. The brain causes it to move. What does that mean? What's that? Because how does a flower move? What makes a flower move, or a tree? Wind. In other words, it's not moving on its own volition. It's growing. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking when you see a tree sway, when you see a flower bend, it's because of the wind. But when it comes to the animal kingdom, their movements are because their brains, their intellect have caused them to start to walk. They're more in control of their parts than plants. The plant cannot hide from what might damage it. In other words, imagine a plant is sitting outside Pnei Shmuel. The trees are sitting outside Pnei Shmuel, the shul here in Mitzbenevo, one of many. And they look towards Yerushalayim from where our weather comes, and they see it's January, it's the middle of winter, and they see this heavy black cloud, and they can hear the wind rushing and blowing, see the heavy rains coming towards them, and all the little plants go, oh no, we're gonna get out of here. They can't do that. Okay, yes, they do. We know that flowers will close up with the lack of sunlight during the nighttime. We open up. We're not talking about that. We're talking about actually trying to protect yourself from what could be a problem. They don't see a dog coming to bite their heads off, literally, the head of the flower, and try to run away. They can't. But the animals can. Nor can the plant kingdom run towards that which can be beneficial for it. Just the wind plays with them. The animal kingdom, it has limbs that move it from place to place. He said the first thing we talked about the plant kingdom, I'm going to call that nature, teva. Remember, this is the Rav talking about the philosophers now, not what we believe or not how we look at things. He says the first grouping is called teva. This next grouping is called nefesh. I'm going to translate just loosely as soul. And the souls in these different animals change greatly. That all the different animals, based on their needs and how Hashem created them and imbued them with various tchunot, various character traits, will change the way that a frog works and acts and thinks is very different than a lion, but they're still both part of the same category. which he's calling nefesh. Even though, tachlis, think about this. Why in the world are there mosquitoes? Right? Why are there giraffes? Maybe you can think of a reason. Why are there animals that live in some far-flung islands that no one may ever see? What is their purpose in this world? So just like we don't know, even though we don't know what the purpose of these animals might be, just like on a ship, many of the instruments that they're just unknown to the passengers as to what is their purpose. And we too, we have parts of our body, we don't know what they're there for. I mean, do you understand exactly how your spleen works relative to everything else? Maybe if you've done some investigation. And even if these parts of our body were laid out in front of us, we would not know the benefit of every single bone, every limb. I use my spleen, right? I just don't use my appendix because that was taken out when I was 7. But I use my fingers. I use the cartilage at the tip of my nose, whatever it is. We use them, but I don't know what they're all there for. They say, the Gemara says, why do we have our fingers shaped like this? And what's the purpose of the soft tissue by the cartilage at the bottom of the ear? You're supposed to, when you hear Lashon Hara, it says, you're supposed to stick your finger in your ear. That's why it's shaped like that. And if you can't do that, you're supposed to fold your ear inside. Okay, whatever. It's cute. I shouldn't say cute. It's in the Gemara. It's clear that if we were missing one of these things in our body, we would be lacking something and we would need them. It says just like we don't understand why all these things exist in our body, so too many things exist in creation that we also don't understand, but they're there for a very specific reason. Okay, now what I want to do is I'm going to stop here because the next long paragraph we're going to do is about, before we get to paragraph 12, is then going to talk about humans. We're only going to do about the second half, not doing the first half even of that paragraph. And then we're going to talk about humans, and then we're going to talk about, I'm going to read to you in the part of the book from Rabbi Karabkin before we continue. Let me explain to you why. Let me just mark down where we're going to start next time. Sorry, because otherwise I will forget. Start here. Okay. He is going to, the Rav is going to go into a very long series of discussions from now till probably most of this book is over, and will rely heavily on Greek philosophy. I want you to imagine the following scenario. You walk into Mir Yeshiva in Yerushalayim, or you walk into Lakewood Yeshiva in New Jersey, in Lakewood, New Jersey, and you say that you want to give a shiur, and 75% of your sources for the shiur is Greek philosophy. How many nanoseconds would it take before they throw you out? Treif Chazer, Greek philosophy. So why is it that we have a book that is considered one of the greatest books of philosophy in Jewish life, the Kuzari, where he spends dozens and dozens and dozens of pages using Greek philosophy in one way to support the Jewish beliefs? How is that? So Rabbi Karabkin deals with it in his book, and that's what I'll look at next week as well, before we embark on that next part, okay? So in the meantime, I wish you all a good evening and Godspeed, and hope everyone is healthy. Be well.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.